Good afternoon, and welcome to Chautauqua Institution. We are coming to you live from Lene Hall on the CHQ Assembly. Welcome to this special edition of Chautauqua Chamber Music meets Into the Music with Chautauqua Symphony Orchestra. Today, we are featuring two fabulous CSO musicians, Igor Gefter and Anton Shalapov, now known as Two Russians, 8 Strings. Friends, today I wanted to remind you that you too can submit your questions for the musicians. We will have a program which is about 40 minutes in length, and that will leave us time for conversation with not only these two wonderful musicians, but these two wonderful human beings. You may submit your questions by writing them into questions.chq.org, or you can tweet them to us at hashtag CHQ2020. Again, these wonderful musicians, Igor and Anton, will be joining us for post-concert conversation. So a little bit about our two musicians today. Internationally acclaimed cellist Igor Gefter joined the Toronto Symphony Orchestra in 2006. During the summers, he also serves as a principal cellist of the Grand Teton Music Festival and is a member, of course, of the Chautauqua Symphony Orchestra. His numerous honors include multiple Chalmers Performing Arts Awards from the Ontario Arts Council, as well as 4 consecutive B grants from the Canada Council for the Arts to study abroad. In 1997, he was a recipient of the John B.C. Watkins Fellowship from the Canada Council. In 1991, Mr. Gefter won first prize in the Canadian Music Competition, which resulted in numerous recitals throughout Canada. At age 14, he was one of the most distinguished young cellists in Russia. He was chosen to perform at the recital hall of the Moscow Conservatory. Mr. Gefter holds Bachelor and Master of Music degrees from the Juilliard School. He performs on a very special cello, a cello made by Christopher Dungy, and it was made for him in 2013. I hear that Mr. Dungy might be joining us today on the CHQ Assembly. Violinist Anton Shalapov is a native Siberian, and he earned a master's degree and a doctorate in violin performance from St. Petersburg Conservatory and Michigan State University, respectively. He is a winner in various international competitions, including the 1999 Garth Chamber Music, St. Petersburg, Russia, 2000 Tadeusz Vronsky Solo Violin Competition, 2008 William Byrd Young Artist Competition, and he has received the prestigious David Oistrakh Award from Rostropovich's Slava International Foundation. As a soloist, Shalapov has appeared in both Americas, Europe, and Russia. He joined the North Carolina Symphony Orchestra in September 2016. He also serves as concertmaster of the West Virginia Symphony Orchestra, and of course, he spends his summer as a member of the Chautauqua Symphony Orchestra. Friends, we welcome you live from Lene Hall, Two Russians, 8 Strings.
Good afternoon, everybody. You just heard 3 pieces from the Gliere cycle of 8 pieces for violin and cello. The next piece that we would like to perform for you is by Zoltán Kodaly, a Hungarian composer, turn of the century, who was a contemporary of Béla Bartók. And Kodaly was ethnomusicologist and educator, and he was extremely interested in collecting tunes from remote villages of Hungary and other countries that used to be Hungary, Croatia, and Romania. Some of this music that he has collected in these remote villages is very unknown to the Western world. He brought it to the Western world and shared it with his friend Béla Bartók, who actually continued his traditions. The beauty about his music is he was able to combine all of these native tunes with classical traditions of Western music and the modern music at the time. And this is his unique style. This is Zoltán Kodaly's duo for cello and violin, written in 1914.
I now get to say bravo. So, friends, I am here live from Lene Hall. I am applauding on your behalf for Igor and Anton, who are right across the hall from me. Friends, I can't express to you how exciting it is to hear live music here in Lene. I wish I could bring all of you from your porches, from your homes, right here to Chautauqua Institution. But this is the best we can do, and I hope you agree with me that these two musicians are an example of the stunning soloists and chamber musicians that we have right here in our own Chautauqua Symphony Orchestra. Right before they started playing, I wanted to look up, with the help of Steve Slaff, our managing director of the CSO, who is right here behind the scenes, when they both joined. And Anton joined the CSO in 2016. Igor joined in 2017. So you can see that these are both newer musicians with the Chautauqua Symphony Orchestra. And I am just so excited that we had this opportunity to really feature what incredible musicianship we have in our orchestra. I wanted to remind you, friends, that they will be joining us for conversation. I'm just giving them a minute to cool off. And you can submit all of these questions to us at questions.chq.org. You may also tweet us your questions at #CHQ2020, and that should be showing on your screen. So when we talk to these musicians today, we can ask them a little bit about life in Chautauqua, some about the repertoire, and of course what it means to now be 2 Russians and 8 strings. I can share with you that we've had a real time of evolution and growth in the Chautauqua Symphony Orchestra. This has been Rossen Milanoff's 5th year as our music director, and I believe that in his time, we have about 23 new members of the Chautauqua Symphony Orchestra. And Anton and Igor are certainly representatives of what excellent level of musicianship we have. So it looks like they are just starting to relax a little bit. Before we move to them, I'll say, gentlemen, are you ready?
Yes, we are.
Fantastic. All right. We are going to have their last piece, and then we'll be joining you soon for questions. Thank you so much, and we will see you soon. friends, I'm again applauding on your behalf to Anton and to Igor, our two members of the Chautauqua Symphony Orchestra, who have just brought you today's incredible concert, emerging of our Chautauqua Chamber Music Series and Into the Music with the Chautauqua Symphony Orchestra. That is a Passacaglia like I've rarely heard played live, and I am so grateful to these incredible musicians. While they do their final cool off before they come into conversation with all of us, I wanted to share with you why the change in programming, if you are watching this change in programming. Because, of course, we are in a time of COVID and there are travel advisories all over, we had a trio planned for today that had to cancel because of travel advisories. These two fine musicians received an email from me on July 22nd, and if I'm right, that was 5 days ago. This incredible concert that they just performed for you was put together in 4 days or less. They came and warmed up this morning, and I think this is just exemplary. It is an example of how our musicians in the Chautauqua Symphony Orchestra, who I rarely get to hear as soloists or as chamber musicians, can serve as a duo that is as stunning as what you just heard today. So I want to look across the hall and tell Igor and Anton thank you from all of us that are watching. They're just getting their microphones on. And remind all of you that if you have even comments to share with these two musicians or questions, you can come into this conversation. We are right here in Linnae Hall at Chautauqua Institution, coming to you through the CHQ Assembly. And you can submit your questions at the information you see below, questions.chq.org, or tweet us at #CHQ2020. So that was quite a rousing close to the concert. I think our friends here are ready. Let's go to Igor and Anton.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so thrilled to be here and performing for you and performing this amazing music and being in the most beautiful place on earth, the most artistically inspiring place on earth. This summer has been very different from every summer, but it hasn't really stopped us from coming together and creating the beautiful music together. And that's why we decided to come.
This summer was a perfect opportunity for us to come and finally learn pieces we wanted to learn for a long time. And, well, you've heard it now.
Here we are.
Well, gentlemen, this was an exquisite concert experience. And I keep thinking, normally people, of course, think of our Chautauqua Symphony Orchestra as one body of amazing musicians. And of course, there is no replacing that power of sound when you have 74 or more people on stage. Absolutely. And yet this summer, what we focused on as we go into the music is individual musicians of the CSO. So we can really feel this exciting level of excellence and artistry that you both bring. So first, tell us about this name, 2 Russians, 8 strings. You had, what, 4 days notice. Where did the name come from?
Well, it's interesting that you ask. When the idea of coming to Chautauqua and collaborating with Anton this summer came to our minds, and we were still in Toronto with my family, we're out for a daily walk. And I said to my family, what shall we call ourselves? Anton and Igor? I mean, that sounds good, but I think we can do better than that. And my son, who is 13-year-old, very talented and smart boy, Daniel Gefter, has just like that said, 2 Russians, 8 strings. And he didn't think twice about it. And that name just stuck. We thought it sounded great, and that's what it is now.
Fantastic. Well, so Daniel, we want to thank you. We want to give a call out to Igor's son for this fabulous name. So when you were talking about coming here for the summer, we were on our feet trying to make programs. So you must have already had an idea that the two of you wanted to perform together. Is that right?
Well, we have actually been close friends for the past 3 or 4 years, ever since meeting here in Chautauqua. Chautauqua is a phenomenal place to meet people and great colleagues. And we were looking for an opportunity to play together, perform together, and this was just a perfect opportunity. We said, why don't we play some duos. And that was it. I called him up one day. I said, have you ever heard of Zoltan Kodaly's duo? He said, of course I've heard it, but I've never played it. I said, well, it's time you do.
Time you learn.
Yes, and we have planned on learning it. And then when I came here, a bunch of other pieces came to light, and we've learned another 1 or 2 different programs in the meanwhile. Of course, Zoltan Kodaly's duo was not quite ready, as you mentioned 4 or 5 days ago. It was in the very early stages. But I think, putting 6-hour practice days since then, put in some magic into this.
It is just a stunning piece. So tell us a little bit about this repertoire. And Anton, maybe I will start with you. Let's talk a little bit about Gliere. So I was talking with Timothy Muffet. Tim says to tell you both it was stunning, by the way. He and I sometimes text live during the concert, and he says, can you believe this? And I say, no, I can't believe this. So Timothy Muffet, thank you, he's watching. And he actually submitted a question for you about the Gliere, noting that Gliere has really been on the fringe of repertoire in the US, and he was wondering if this is different, if Gliere might be played a little more frequently in Russia or in Europe, what you had to say about that, if Gliere really had a different profile, and if you had some favorite works of Gliere's that we should have a listen to.
As a matter of fact, Gliere is not oftenly performed in Russia or Europe, as much as I know, and his repertoire is very vast for cello, actually.
Cello concerto.
He has a cello concerto and 10 cello duets among those 8 duets for cello and violin. But how I know about Gliere is that my wife's father, throughout his youth, listened to the LP recording of Gliere's coloratura soprano concerto with the orchestra, and Irina says she remembers this piece being so beautiful that she loved it. So I was very happy Igor offered us to learn a few pieces from these 8 duets for violin and cello. Interesting fact that Gliere in his, I hope the mic is still here, I'm talking with my hands a lot. I'm going to hold it. Gliere traveled a lot through Central Asia, and he, as well as Kodaly, as Igor mentioned, collected some folk music, and his compositions really related to folk music of Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan. So that's a very interesting connection we learned about through this program.
Thank you.
Fabulous, and thank you for sharing that. Igor, I really wanted to ask about the Handel and Halvorsen as well.
Yeah.
So what a masterpiece that is.
Isn't it?
And most of us know Handel, but would love for you to tell us a little bit Halvorsen. And also, I believe this duet is sometimes played on viola and violin as well. Could you walk us through that?
Yes, so the original tune, the one that you hear at the very opening of this piece, is indeed written by George Frederick Handel himself, and it's a last movement, one of the themes of his last movement of the harpsichord concerto number 3 in G major. Now, what Halvorsen was, Johan Halvorsen was a Norwegian violinist and a composer at the turn of the 20th century. He was extremely famous as a violinist, but even more so, he was famous for taking pieces and known pieces and making them his own. And he had come across this tune, he loved the tune, and said, let me write a piece, a set of variations on this tune. Now, it's interesting that he called it a Passacaglia. Passacaglia, the word actually, the form, it's the name of the form. The structure of Passacaglia is derives from ancient Spain. Well, not so ancient, dates back to 17th century Spain, where they had these street musicians and dancers roaming around towns and villages, putting out shows. And in between the pieces, there would be a lute player that would strum these chords just to give them musicians a rest or dancers to change the set. So that was called Passacaglia, that strumming. Now, the Italians, of course, got a hold of that, and of course, being the Italians and one of the most inventive musicians, they had transformed that into a different form of set of variations. So Halvorsen took the very well-known form and just created this beautiful set of variations. Violin and viola was the original setting that he wrote it for. I believe it was around 1894 that he composed this piece. Of course, violin and viola are very close in their range. And viola and cello are 1 octave, the entire 1 octave apart. In fact, the cello is tuned to exactly the same strings A, D, G, C as a viola is just 1 octave lower. So a lot of, it made a lot of sense to actually transform that for the cello because it expands the entire range of this ensemble and creates a much more convincing presentation, so to say. And of course, this is a greatly virtuosic piece that shows off both instruments in both lyrical and virtuosic form. So it's a great showpiece. In fact, this often is performed as an encore, and it's a great piece to finish off the program, I believe.
It felt like an encore today, and I felt that I hope that you felt everyone's rousing applause and energy from their porches or their homes or wherever they are. Both of you know that I'm a percussionist, and so when it comes to string repertoire, I find myself leaning on Timothy Muffet or Rawson Milanoff, and I say, tell me a little bit more about this. And Tim was telling me that while this piece expresses itself so romantically, that the origins really, it's Handel, lies in the Baroque. And we were wondering, how do you balance the idea of Baroque performance practices with doing this on contemporary instruments? Is there any discussion about that anymore, or it's just assumed that you move forward without necessarily thinking about those Baroque performance practices?
Well, do you want to take it?
Well, we specifically wanted to take the Passacaglia in the romantic direction. Actually, as a matter of fact, we talked about that some of the spots represent a gypsy kind of approach, more like a dance of fiery, gypsies walking by, than Handel with the pompous Baroque stuff.
Yet,
it still has the Passacaglia line and the bass and
right, and if you notice, a lot of these variations repeat themselves sometimes. So on the first run, we would often play it in a romantic style, but on the second run, we would play it more in a Baroque style, as use of tremolos and flotandos.
Well, if you consider that the strokes we use, such as ponticello right next to the bridge, or tremolo, trembling above the fingerboard, I don't think those tricks were around when Handel composed the piece.
No, but we make them sound.
We make them sound Baroque.
Anton, will you show us that ponticello?
It's like a steely, glassy sound, Halloweenish kind of.
Yes, and why would that have not been around in the Baroque? Can you explain that to us a little?
Because the instruments changed from that period of time to ours. The fingerboard, this black thing where the strings are, got longer. The strings also were made of gut, and now they're made of metals and different composite materials. And that makes our instruments nowadays sound stronger, louder. And we like to, branch out and find all these weird sounds, different colors.
Absolutely. I mean, even the gut strings are not capable of producing the same tone and the strength of the sound that the modern strings, as Anton mentioned. They're extremely warm sounding and round, but they're not punchy and they're not powerful, and they were never meant to be because people would play in chambers, in rather small chambers, or the King's Court's chambers, which were not so small, but it was enough for them to project enough sound. So there was no need to play in a 3,000 people auditorium. So the instruments have changed tremendously, thus the performance practices reflecting that.
Yes. Well, we do have a question here where someone says maybe we should name it 2 Russians, 8 strings, 2 iPads. And could you share with us, maybe you could even lift up so our audience can see the foot pedals that you have. And if you could talk us through how you are turning your pages. Definitely not Baroque style.
Yeah.
No, as far from it as it gets. Here,
So you can point
I don't
it
know
to
if
the
you
camera.
can
Point it to
point,
the
let's
camera.
point it to the camera.
Yeah.
You can flip the pages while pressing. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah, you're
Here we
doing
go.
it. Yeah.
So with my foot at a certain spot, I tap on the pedal, and it.
Are you able to tilt the screen just a little bit down so we can see
Oh,
the
absolutely.
black notes?
Down.
Like that.
Which way?
How's that?
Oh,
Like that?
perfect,
That's
right
perfect.
there.
Here we
That way
go.
we can
So,
see
now-
what you're looking at.
Can you
Now let's.
now see if you can turn the pages?
Yeah, here
there
we
we go.
go.
You are turning pages. Yeah.
Any luck now?
Yeah.
Yes.
And the iPads have been a real lifesaver for us with aging eyes, as you notice. It comes in very handy because the backlight is constant and consistent, as opposed to being dependent on ambient lights of the places where we're sometimes faced with poor lights when we perform, and sometimes not so poor lights, but this, you can really count on this. Another phenomenal advantage of this is when we play outside and when we play at the auditorium outside, and the wind blows, and we need to use the pins to hold on to the music. Nothing like this ever happens with iPad. As solid as possible, you can turn the page and count that no matter how strong the wind is going to be as you're performing outside, nothing will happen to your pages.
So tonight we feature the musician's Kindle, is really what
There we
this
go.
is.
That's
Thank you
right.
for sharing
That's
that with us. So let's talk about the two of you. That's half the fun when we go into the music. We also like to talk a little bit about the musicians. You, by your title, have said that you're two Russians coming together. Could you just each tell us briefly what brought you to North America?
Well, my parents and I immigrated when I was 14-year-old. And we came to Canada, where we had settled, and some of our family had settled in early 70s. Of course, my parents were looking for a brighter future for me. I'm the only son in the family, and for artistic opportunities that I might not have had living in a former USSR. It has been the blessing that I was given, and I am forever grateful to my parents for doing that. Shortly after being in Canada, I went to study to Juilliard, to New York City, just because that was the place to be. There was the best teacher, Harvey Shapiro, that legendary Harvey Shapiro. And I spent 5 years at Juilliard. Then I was very lucky to have, was offered to play as a substitute and an acting member with the New York Philharmonic for about 8 years. Since then, I won a job at the Fort Worth Symphony as the associate principal. Played there for a year, and then the position at the Toronto Symphony came up where my parents still live. And at that point, my wife and I wanted to have a family, and we thought what a better place to live in would be than Toronto would be perfect. So I took the audition, won the job, and we moved to Toronto in 2005. That's in a nutshell my North American story.
Well, that's a big nutshell, and I hope your parents have great satisfaction in seeing how your career has blossomed here. Anton, will you just share with us your nutshell of a journey?
I'm going to be less of the nutshell, maybe eggshell. So I've moved here for school, and I was looking for an opportunity to move to the U.S. because I've been already to 48 states before I came to live here. So I knew exactly where I wanted to be. We traveled a lot with the Kremlin Chamber Orchestra, where my wife and I had a job before we moved here to the U.S. So I got accepted into a doctoral program at Michigan State University under tutelage of Professor Walter Verder, who is a fabulous chamber musician. Verder Trio is very famous here. Then just I kept applying for orchestras, winning jobs, and that led me to West Virginia, North Carolina, and finally Chautauqua.
We are so fortunate to have you both. And again, I had mentioned in one of our breaks that you joined in 2016 and 2017. So you are newer members of the orchestra. And yet I see that you have really embraced not just the orchestra, but really the community at Chautauqua. You are both here with your families, with young children. I'm not sure if an event goes by in the amphitheater where I don't see at least Igor's family sitting in the front 3 rows. So let's close out today with me asking you a really simple question. What does Chautauqua mean to you and your families? And Anton, maybe we could start with you.
It's an incredible, rewarding place to be with the family. The kids are watching you play on stage. They're seeing all this culture, all this diversity and acceptance everywhere here. And beauty of the place is just unmatched. And we're so blessed that we were able to buy a house a few years ago here on Potter Road. So we call ourselves complete Chautauquans now.
Thank you. Igor.
A year before I joined, I came in to play as an extra player for a couple of weeks, and I brought in my family with me. My son was at the Boys Club at the time, and when we came home after Chautauqua, he said to me, he looked at me and said, "Dad, this was the best summer ever." Then the position came up, and I started preparing for the job, and all I could hear in my ears is that phrase ringing over and over again. This is the best place for the family. This is the best place to make friends, to absorb all the art and culture that's here, and completely submerge yourself in a cultural oasis. And it's the kind of chance that very few people are given in the world, I would say. I don't really know of a second place like this. And I feel extremely blessed to be here and to have my family really enjoy everything Chautauqua has to offer.
So friends, you've heard these 2 musicians, these 2 Chautauquans, express what I think means so much to many of us here, how to embrace the arts and diversity and conversation at Chautauqua, the beautiful lakeside community that we all get to enjoy. Whether you are tuning in today because you miss Chautauqua, or whether you are just now being introduced to Chautauqua through the CHQ Assembly, we thank you for coming into the music with us today. I find, gentlemen, that there's this beautiful story here of Igor and Anton talking about their journeys and their path to living where they live now. And Igor, it really strikes me that you were talking about the opportunity that your parents wanted to make for you. And now here you are continuing that, and you are both making that opportunity for your own children. So to both of these musicians, Anton Shelipov and Igor Gefter, we thank you for your artistry. We thank you for sharing your story with us today on the CHQ Assembly, and we look forward to hearing more music live.
Okay. Thank you for having us.
CHQ Assembly is made possible through the collaboration and innovation of Chautauqua Institution's full-time and part-time staff, seasonal staff, and many volunteers, as well as participants like you, whose engagement, gifts, and subscriptions sustain our mission.